Hey folks, Doug here from Sidetracks, and I thought I'd try something new and start a new series here, a playlist on the YouTube channel focused on board game design. So when I closed up the brick and mortar shop at Sidetracks 6 months ago or so, I wanted to continue doing something related to board games. And if you see something moving in the background, that's just the dog Dolly. She's exploring the shop here. But I wasn't exactly sure what I wanted to do. For years, decades almost, I've had this in my mind that I wanted to do sort of a board game cafe, but not so much the cafe part, more membership driven. And we tried that. Worked for about a year, and did our best to try to make that work, and it just didn't work. It's a small town. It's a new thing, new concept. It was hard to sort of get people to latch on to that. And frankly, I underestimated how draining the whole thing would be in terms of just the number of hours spent there, in addition to regular work and raising kids and being involved in the community and other stuff. It was a lot to be there all the time. There were some 10, 12 hour days where I'd be there and there might only be one or two customers the whole entire day. And as much as I enjoyed getting to play more games and teach people games, that was great. It just wasn't something that was sustainable. But it was one of those things like I'd much rather regret it and try it and fail than to not try it and then just wonder forever, if it could have worked or what it would have been like. So I learned a ton doing it. And one of the things that I recognized was that, I've been doing board games. I've been in this board game hobby for a couple decades now, to different degrees of severity or depth, and one of the things that I quickly realized with this, so many people just have no idea that this whole board game world is out there, right? Most of the games that they've been introduced to as kids were just the mass market stuff like Monopoly and Uno and Scrabble and things like that. Okay, Dolly. And not that there's anything wrong with that. Those are the games I learned growing up. Careers was one of my favorite roll and move games ever. But there's so much out there. And one of the things that I quickly realized is that it's hard to teach people games. Like, it really is a skill. I feel like I've gotten pretty good at it because I've had so much practice. But for people who know games and are into games, it's easy to teach new games. Because you're like, okay, this does a thing like, there is in Concordia. And it's just like that. Oh, okay, I've played Concordia, so I understand that, right? But without that touchstone of similar mechanisms in other games, it's really hard to teach new games because some of these concepts are completely new and foreign. And I gained a new appreciation for that. And the other thing that it hit me. I went to Gen Con this year, which is the biggest board game convention in the United States, with Levi. And Levi and I had a chance to work for a really great game publisher called Kids Table Board Games. They put out some really great stuff right in the wheelhouse of the kind of games that I love to teach and I love to play and my family loves to play, because they're games that are fairly simple to learn. You could teach a 10-year-old, but there's depth and strategy. And the more you play the game, you realize, oh, there's a lot more to this than I thought. So they're games that are quick to learn and easy to teach, but they have some depth to them. And those are, working the booth and seeing some of their games, it occurred to me, man, these are really the types of games that I love. Ticket to Ride, stuff like that. It's a simple game, but I could play that game 1,000 times and never get tired of it. Wingspan's a little more complex, okay? But really, once you get a hang of the mechanisms, it's not that complicated. We've played that game hundreds of times. I actually track how many times I've played that game. I think Joanne and I are up to about 200 plays a piece of Wingspan. We just love it, and we'll play it over and over and over again. And so a couple things occurred to me on the drive home. I had a 6-hour drive home because Levi flew back to Philly and I drove home by myself. And for years, I've been jotting down ideas for games in a notebook. And, every once in a while, I just, usually it's on the tractor when I'm cutting grass. I'll have an idea like, oh, you know what, that would make a really cool game. Or sometimes when I'm watching a movie or reading a book, I'll be like, man, this is a theme that would really be cool in games. And I'm not your typical nerd. I'm kind of a unique nerd, I guess, in that I don't really like comic books. I'm not into movies that much. I don't like sci-fi. I'm not into Star Wars or Star Trek or a lot of the game themes that a lot of gamers are really into. Dungeons and Dragons and fantasy type stuff. I'm not really interested in that. The stuff that I love is based more in reality. And it's just like the way people read books. My daughter loves reading books. She loves fiction, right? She's read all the Harry Potters, the Hunger Games, all those different series. Those don't hold much interest to me, maybe because, I've always enjoyed history and social studies, but I find that real life and nonfiction to me is way more interesting than fiction. And so most of the themes that I gravitate toward in board games tend to be games that are real. They're set in the real world, not in a fantasy world. I love train games. I love pirate themed games, Wild West type games, anything that's geography related that has a good map, whether it be in Africa or Australia or any part of the world. Games, I'm not huge on games that are set like in ancient Egypt, although it's fine, but games that have some real world touch point. So most of the games that are in my head and that I come up with for ideas are games that have that type of real world theme. But it's hard to find games sometimes with interesting themes. Like I said, you find tons of ancient Egypt, the Greeks, the Romans. There's a lot of war games, but war games tend to be really deep. So the games that I like with a real world theme, but in sort of an approachable, easy to teach, easy to learn level, those are hard to find. And so it occurred to me on the ride home from Gen Con, I should think about designing some games. For years, I've fiddled around with game design. I mean, back in the 1980s when I was a kid, my cousin Dan and we designed a video game. I don't even know if you could call it a video game. It was on a Commodore 64 computer. And really, it was just a series of random number generators that we wrote in basic code. But it was a baseball game, and you would type in which position player was up to bat, whether it was your third baseman or your shortstop or whatever. And there was some probability, we didn't really run numbers, we just went with our gut. But there was probability built into it to where second baseman and shortstops at the time tended to be light hitting, speedy guys, so their batting average was lower. So the random number generators and the probability we built into it was that those guys might be more inclined to get out or to get singles, whereas your third baseman and your first baseman and your catchers tended to be your power hitters at the time. Those guys were more likely to hit home runs and stuff. And so we spent a week out at his house in New Jersey eating frozen pizzas at 3 a.m. coding this baseball game. I don't know if he even remembers that, but it was great. We had a really great time doing it. So game design is something that I just kind of have always done. My kids and I have rewritten the rules for multiple games. Again, when I was a kid, my brother and we rewrote the rules for a game called Championship Baseball. And I've introduced that game to a lot of people. We had a tournament here last year where we all sat and played it. But we basically got this board game, I think it was from Milton Bradley or Parker's Brothers, out of the box, this baseball game. And it was bad. And so we rewrote the rules and basically developed our own game out of it. And we've been playing that game now for 40 years. We've played that game more collectively than all the other games that we've ever played. So, and then the other game that comes to mind is a game called Age of Mythology, which I love the computer version of that game. And when I got the board game version, it was one of the first games I ever got that had really cool minis in it. And I was like, whoa, this game is awesome. And we started playing, and there were just some real fatal flaws in the design of that game that I'm not sure how I don't know if they play tested it or not, but it was just a bad game because there were a few things like once you got beaten in a battle, people could just continue to pummel you, and there was no way that you would ever come out of that. And so we rewrote the rules for that game too and completely redesigned it and made up our own game. We threw out some components. We added a whole different scoring system and basically redesigned the game using the components that were in the box. And that's still, my son Levi, it's still one of his favorite games of all time. All right, Dolly. So, you know, we've been fiddling with game design for a long time. I remember back when I used to be an engineer, and I used AutoCAD, MicroStation a lot to design signing and pavement marking plans for roads. In my free time, I would fiddle around and I would do game designs in CAD. And I remember designing a train game on there, or I started to design it. I mean, I was designing the board essentially. And then years later, I picked up a game called Continental Divide, and I'm like, wow, this map looks just like the one that I did on AutoCAD all those years ago. So I've fiddled around with game design for a really long time, but on this ride back from Gen Con this year, I kind of got it in my head that I really want to try to take this a little more seriously and see what I can do with it. And so I pulled out my binder of all these different game ideas that I've had over the years. It's sort of this mind map of game ideas. And I started to pull out, actually on the ride home, there's one that's been in my mind for probably a year now. A game that revolves around creating a marching band or assembling a marching band and putting it in a parade. And to win the game, you have to be the best in show, the best marching band in the parade. And so this game's been kicking around my head because all 6 of my kids have been involved in marching band, and it's been a fantastic experience for all of them. They've all learned so much from it, and I enjoy watching them. Me and my wife Joanne, we love watching the kids in the band. And so it occurred to me that's a real world theme that I did a little searching on BGG since then, and I found that over the years there's been a few games with band themes, music themes, but not really what I had in mind. And so on the 6-hour drive home, I started sort of formulating, kicking all these ideas around in my head again that I had been thinking about, and really designing the game in my head over that 6-hour drive. And so I would stop at a rest area, get out and go to the bathroom and jot down some notes, and then I'd drive for another hour or two and I'd stop and I'd jot down some notes. And when I came home, I started putting it all together. And since then, I built a prototype for it and have actually started play testing it, and I think it's pretty fun. Everybody that I've played with so far seems to like it and have enjoyed it. But I've really got into now watching more board game podcasts, board game design YouTube stuff. There's some really good stuff out there. There's a guy named Gabe Barrett who had a Board Game Design Lab podcast that I listened to years ago, but just kind of like in the background as things were going on and never really focused on the content. It was more like just picking up concepts and listening to board game designers talk. And now it's on YouTube. So I've gone back and I've started re-listening to those and taking notes this time and actually sort of listening with intent. There's another lady named Pam Walls who is a board game designer, and she's started a YouTube channel specifically about board game design, and it's great. I love listening to her, and she'll get on there and fiddle with her prototypes and talk while she's doing it, and that's a lot of fun to listen to. There's a guy in Wales over in the UK named Adam in Wales. I've listened to a bunch of his stuff. And he's had some really awesome tutorials on there. There's website that sponsors his channel called Launch Tabletop, and he actually goes through and shows you how in Canva, the software program Canva, you can design things and then you could send it to Launch Tabletop to produce, prototypes and games and things. And so that's been really helpful. The older I get, the less interested, or I say the more reluctant I am to dive into new computer programs. Like I mentioned, I used to do AutoCAD and MicroStation, and I grew up on Microsoft Office products, and so my go-to is Excel. Even for graphics, I'll create them in Excel, believe it or not. Excel and PowerPoint, I could do so much of those just because I've learned them over the years. And so all the teachers I work with have been doing Canva. I keep hearing about it. And I was really reluctant. It's like, I don't want to have to learn another new program. When I was a teacher's aide a couple years ago, everything was a Google platform. And so you had to learn Google Classroom and Google Docs. And it was just different enough from Microsoft that it was kind of annoying, right? But it's like the older I get, the less I want to have to learn those new platforms. But once I watched the Adam and Wales podcast episodes, and he was showing me what you could do in Canva, I'm like, man, I'm messing around in Excel and Word and PowerPoint doing this stuff, and it'd be way easier if I could learn how to do that. So the last week or two, I've really dove into that and started playing with it and learning a lot, and it's been really helpful. I designed for this marching band game, I designed everything first, and then I started getting into the Canva thing. For my other designs that I'm working on, so I'm currently working on 3 different games, I think I'm just gonna do it in Canva to start with, and from now on, that'll be part of my process. But I'm just looking at my list here. Adam and Wales has been great. Pam Walls has been great. Jamie Stegmaier, I listened to his podcast. He's the owner of Stonemeyer Games, who makes Wingspan and a bunch of other really great games. He does some great podcasts about design. Ben Maddox on the Dice Tower Network. He's got, I think most of his videos are a little older. But again, I go back and watch stuff from 5, 6, 7 years ago, and it's still helpful and it's still valid. I've for a long time, I've watched Dice Tower videos about board game reviews and stuff. And so that's another way I keep up with games that even I can't play or I've never played, just keep up with what's going on in the industry. But then I've also recently, one of my favorite channels has become a show called Foster the Meeple, a couple from Canada who does board game design reviews and stuff. And I really like their stuff too. So I've been watching a lot of YouTube. One of the benefits of my work from home job is I've got dual monitors, and I can be grading assignments over here and have YouTube going on the other screen. And so I can do sort of 2 things at once, and I can get through a lot of YouTube. So I've watched a lot of stuff on board game design recently, and it's been really great. But generally, overall, my goal is I like family weight games that are easy to teach, that are easy for people to get into, and those are the games I like to play, but those are the games I want to design as well. So as I mentioned, I'm currently working on 3 designs. One is the band related one. A second one is one that I designed 6 years ago that I just stuck in the closet and didn't think about again. But it's a Boy Scout related theme, because Boy Scouts is something, again, that's important to me, that my kids have been involved in. And there's this card game that I always teach the Scouts and that we play on a lot of campouts. And we call it Trump, but I think it's built off of a game that called Oh Hell, or there are a bunch of other names for it. But it's a trick-taking card game. And so I thought, boy, it would be cool to take, and when you're teaching it to kids who have never played cards or don't know trick taking, it's hard, because it's like spades in that you have to bid. And if you don't know what you're doing, it's really hard to put bids out until you learn how to play trick taking card games. So I thought it'd be cool to design a trick taking card game like this, but without that bidding element, because that's the part that you need experience to be able to do. So I basically designed a scout-themed trick-taking card game where you're playing just like spades or hearts or oh hell or one of those other trick-taking games. But after you play, the number of tricks you take dictates how many chips you pull out of a bag. Sort of like Quacks at Quedlinburg. So there's a little bit of pressure luck to it. And those chips are different merit badges or leadership positions or parts of the scout law. And you collect those up and you build them on your merit badge stash. And so you're trying to make the most impressive merit badge stash. And then there's also some hazards you can run into. So anyway, I dug that game out and started looking at a game. I was like, this is all right. So I'm going to start play testing that as well. And then the third game that I'm working on is an adventure racing game themed around West Virginia, because West Virginia is like my adopted home state, my second state, I guess, after Pennsylvania. And it's sort of this game I want to be sort of my love letter to West Virginia. And one of the things that I was always enamored with, and it's kind of gone away, you don't see it much anymore, but you used to see it on TV a lot, was adventure racing. And it would be people almost like The Amazing Race, but for outdoor enthusiasts. It would be people that would have a map and a compass, and they'd be on a team, and they would have to go hike these trails or canoe or kayak or all these outdoor adventures, like a triathlon almost, but with navigation involved. And I always thought adventure racing was super cool. And I'm too old and fat to do that stuff these days, but I just thought the concept was always really neat, and I loved reading about it and watching it. West Virginia hosts some adventure racing because West Virginia is just such a place of natural beauty, and there's all kinds of awesome outdoor activities you can do. So I wanted to pair those things together. And so that third design that I'm currently working on is a theme around adventure racing in West Virginia. And it's got a little aspect of Ticket to Ride to it, where you have destinations. Basically your adventure racing team has to navigate from different locations, and along the way you're using different dice to move. That was another challenge I wanted to take, in that roll and move games like Monopoly or Careers, where you roll the dice, you move that many spaces, and you do what it says. Those have really fallen out of favor. It's an outdated design, but I wanted to try to take the roll and move mechanism and tweak it a little bit and actually see if I could make a fun game that has a roll and move mechanism in it. And so one of the things that I wanted to do also was incorporate a bunch of different types of dice, because one of the things I noticed with Sidetracks, when I would pull out a game that had dice other than a 6-sided die, people were like, whoa, what is this? A 10-sided die, a 12-sided, I've never seen such a thing. And so I thought it would be cool to have a game that incorporated a whole bunch of different types of dice, styles like that. And so in this game, you're going to be using cards to bid on those dice and then rolling the dice to get movement points for your adventure racing team. But there's also ways to mitigate those dice. So if you have a bad roll, it's not the end of the world, and you can make adjustments to your dice and stuff. So those are the 3 games that I'm currently working on. And, it's been a lot of fun. One of the things that I've started to do is to sort of develop my own process as I go. Like I said, I had that binder with ideas at the beginning. And anytime something pops into my mind, I just have blank sheets in there. I'll go in there and I'll jot them down. And then every once in a while, a game like the band game will get stuck in my head, and I'll start developing that idea, and I'll add notes to that part of the binder. Well, what I've started to do is, once I say, you know what, I like this, I want to work on this game, I will take those sheets out of the binder and create a game binder just for this new design. And so far, like I said, I have a couple individual design binders, and then as the game changes, as I play test it, I make adjustments to it. I have records of the play test that I keep in that binder. And so there's sort of a history there. And if I decide later on that I want to go back and change something back to the way it was, I have those notes. But that's been really helpful in terms of just developing a process. How do I go about this methodically? I've created some prototype areas. My shop here. One of the things, so I've created some supplies, triage some old games, where I have drawers of just parts and components that I could pull from. I have a huge supply of dice and things that I could pull from. So when I want to design a prototype, I can do that. One of the other YouTube channels that I've really gotten into lately is a channel, I think it's called Adam Savage Tested. And Adam Savage was one of the guys on Mythbusters, the TV show on Discovery years ago. And he has a really cool YouTube channel, and it's in his shop, his makerspace. And, he answers questions that people call or send into him. And it's just about sort of the creative process. And I really enjoy watching his show or his podcasts or whatever you call them, YouTube videos. And it occurred to me when watching him, I love the creative process. I love taking an idea that's in your head and making something out of it. And so my kids for Father's Day helped me clean out this garage. And believe it or not, this is clean. It might not look that way, but man, I've spent a lot of time in here the last couple months, and I've enjoyed it so much. I love this space, and I have my bandsaw, I got a table saw, I got my component drawers, I have my drawers with paints, so that I can paint stuff. And I just love that maker space and having a creative space to work with where I can build things. And watching Adam on that channel and seeing his enthusiasm for it, it just sort of helped me click in my head, like, man, I really love just making things, and creating things. And so I think that's why the game design intrigues me so much, and I find a lot of enjoyment out of it. It's one of those things where you get into a flow state, and I could spend 6 or 8 hours working on a game design and like, oh man, I guess I need to eat, or the time passes so fast just because you enjoy doing it and you enjoy the challenge and enjoy creating, and it's just so much fun. So I'm not sure where this will go, but a couple years ago, I kind of felt led in this direction that this game industry, this game thing, I feel like it's a way to connect with people. And as tempted as I am to stay home and cocoon and keep to myself, it's just in my nature. I find that it's good to be out, to be social, even when sometimes it's uncomfortable. And games are my way of being able to do that. It gives me a way, I hate small talk at parties, and I'm the guy who sits in the corner and doesn't say anything to anybody. But games are a way, it gives me something to talk about. It gives me a way to create interactions with people that sort of break the ice and make it comfortable for me, at least, to be able to socialize. A couple years ago, I sort of started down this path of how can I use games to sort of be more in touch with people, to help people, there's a lot of people who are isolated or feel like they don't have friends or whatever. How can I create something that helps with that and that people find joy in and can get a lot of enjoyment? Games have been such a great thing for my family, me and my kids and my wife, and we spent so much family time playing games. It's been such a great thing. How can I help foster that in other families and give that joy to other people? And so I kind of thought sidetracked the physical space would be that. That was an attempt by me to create a space to help create those types of interactions. And it was really fun, and we got a chance to do that. It just didn't make financial sense, or it wasn't economically viable to continue doing that. So I'm still looking for a way to do that. And I'm wondering now if maybe board game design is the way to do that. Is there a way that I can create the tools that then people can take and use with their families and their friends to create these experiences? And so I'm really looking forward to trying. My dream would be to publish a couple games, to have my name on the box saying that I designed a couple games. But even if that doesn't ever happen, I'm going to create some games that I could share with my family and friends, and hopefully we can create more of those positive experiences and have some good times with it. So anyway, I know this video is kind of long, but I'm hoping to add some additional videos to this playlist. And I thought what I would do is, as I develop some of these game ideas, I could show them to you. And if you're interested in play testing any of them, keep in mind these are all prototypes. They're not going to be fancy, brand new, out of the box games. They're going to be things that I cobbled together, right? But play testing is like the most important thing with game design, is getting it out there, playing it, figure out what works, what's broken, what needs to be fixed, what could be better. And so if you're interested in being involved in that process and play testing some of these games, hit me up, let me know. We have here locally in town, we have our friendly local game store, Double Looks Games, and they've been kind enough to let me do a couple play test sessions down there. And so I'm always looking to get these games to the table and have new people try them out and give me feedback. And I'm not just looking for somebody to say, oh, that's the greatest thing. No. I want constructive criticism. I want to make it better. I know these games aren't going to be great right out of the box, or the likelihood of that happening is very slim. So you're not going to hurt my feelings if you say, no, this game's boring. That's what I'm looking for, is positive feedback. So anyway, if you're interested in play testing games and it's something you think would be fun as winter's approaching, you're looking for something to do, hit me up, let me know, and we'll get some of these to the table and you can try them out. All right, take care. We'll see you later.